Good morning, everybody. This is a meeting of the Darien Board of Education Finance Committee. It is March 17th, 2022. It is St. Patrick's Day. Happy St. Patrick's Day, sir.
Thank you.
We're just going to go through the normal routine of the monthly financial report. So, Mr. Rudin.
So it's the financial report through February. We are projecting a year-end positive balance of $651,497. We are still awaiting final reimbursement for Storm Ida totaling $69,033. Everything has been submitted to KERMA, so we're just waiting for that final reimbursement check. So the changes from the previous month's forecast total $278,819. I'll go through all of them, but the primary difference is excess cost related. So in total, clubs and councils are showing a positive balance of just under $13,000. Some of it is step movement savings, and then some clubs not running at the middle school and some elementary schools. Student interns at Royal are showing a savings of $15,300. An intern for the second half of the year could not be secured at Royal. Campus monitors at Royal also show a salary savings of $2,700. That is turnover savings due to a change in personnel. Spring summer help does show a deficit of $6,552. We are still using temporary employees to cover employees out on workers' compensation. This is going to be a recommended transfer to the board. This is similar to the transfer that we had a couple of months ago. It's really an accounting adjustment to take the reimbursements from KERMA for workers' comp to pay for those part-time employees. As discussed at a previous board meeting, we are flagging consultant study for $60,000 for a placeholder for a library architecture study for the high school, middle school, and Tokenique. So that is a projected deficit of $60,000. Darien Summer School and Adult Education show a reduction of $2,050. Speech therapists show a positive balance of $35,000. We do have a speech therapist out on an unpaid leave of absence. That is the fourth one this year. So we are recommending a transfer to take the savings from the salary of the speech therapist who's out on leave to contracted speech to cover the cost of the contractor who is covering the district speech therapist. Excess cost, which I mentioned earlier, shows an increase of $306,678. We have filed the March 1st filing of $3,486,760, which is slightly down from the December filing, which we'll mention in a little bit, of $3.678. But we have updated the potential reimbursement rate from 67.5% to 80%. We have received the first reimbursement totaling $2.2 million. So we received that at the end of February, which is recorded. The balance does come at the end of May. Workers' compensation shows a positive balance of $6,500. And again, that's the reimbursement for the employees out on workers' comp. And then ELP tuition has increased by $3,200 as we did have a late enrollee in the program. So breaking down the sections, the general education RCs are a positive $107,685. Special education RCs are $543,813 to the positive, which is essentially all excess cost related. And then COVID RC is $0, so totaling $651,497. Moving to RC1, Darien High School. As I mentioned previously, $16,700 in unfilled interns, some small savings in clubs and councils and custodians. No change at Fitch. At the middle school, there is a positive balance of $16,700 due to unfilled interns and positive balance of $10,697 in clubs and councils. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some step savings in the webmaster stipend, the yearbook stipend, the quiz bowl stipend, and the jazz lab stipend. Hindley, no change. Holmes, no change. Oxford, no change. Royal, as I mentioned earlier, is a positive balance of $15,300, which is the second half of the year interns, and then $2,700 for the campus monitor turnover. No change in RC10 Tokenique. In RC12, we are still flagging that the deductible costs were reserved for emergency repair related to the storm. Once we get that final check in from KERMA, we'll bring a recommended transfer to extinguish the cost of the deductible. We are flagging the deficit in spring part-time summer help. And again, that is a recommended transfer as well. No change in the rentals for both the fields and the building. No change in RC13. In RC16, consultants do show a negative balance of $59,079. That is for the $60,000 placeholder for the architectural study for the library at the high school, middle school, and Tokenique. And as reported previously, we do have a small balance, positive balance of $921. No change in RC18 or RC20. RC23, the adult education, shows a positive balance of $2,500 as the cost of the adult ed cooperative with Stanford Public Schools was less than anticipated just due to less participants in the adult ed program. RC 24, as I mentioned earlier, we do have a speech therapist out on a long-term leave of absence. So we have salary savings of $35,000. This position is being covered by a contracted speech provider. So we are recommending a transfer to move those savings into the contracted speech line. So the March 1st filing claim was filed at $3.4 million, which is $191,000 less than the December 1st claim. The reduction is due to a couple of placements that the state considered not reimbursable. So based on that and based on the estimated revenues, we are assuming an 80% reimbursement rate. It's not final yet. We probably won't know for about another month. Right now, they're still showing the estimated revenues at 82%. So if it's at 82% and not the 80, we get another $69,000. So if that changes, obviously we'll update this. But based on an 80% reimbursement rate and the $3.4 million filing on March 1st, we would receive $2,789,408, which is $547,000 above budget, which is essentially that positive balance that you see in RC 24. We did file, as we mentioned, in December, 6 additional students in that claim. In RC 25, we still have a positive balance in diesel fuel, positive balance in heat and electricity, and telephone and sewer. We do have that positive balance in workers' compensation, which we are recommending as a transfer. In RC 26, we're still carrying that positive balance in teacher aid account, and then the ELP tuition line did improve slightly due to that late enrollee that I mentioned. Overall, we are forecasting a positive balance of $651,496.
Questions?
I asked this last time, Rich, but the student interns, given that we're not able to fill those positions in a couple of the buildings, are we seeing an increase in the substitute line? Last month, it wasn't particularly an issue, but I'm just curious.
We've seen a little bit of an increase in the daily sub line. Okay. We've actually had less turnover in the building sub line than we've seen in the past. So that has certainly helped. But subs in general are difficult to find, but the daily sub has ticked up a little bit.
Okay.
On fuel cost, what are you forecasting for the end of the year? I mean, what metrics are you using to, as we see?
So we have a locked-in rate right now through June 30th. Our rate's actually very favorable considering fuel costs right now. We're $1.79. So it's really just a fluctuation in usage. So right now we've picked up again with the charters for athletics, and we're expecting that for the spring sport. So we don't expect a lot for diesel. And we're starting to get to the warmer weather, so we think the heat will be pretty close. We might have a little bit more favorable savings in diesel fuel, but we're just kind of waiting for those bills to come in usage.
And then when do you lock in?
So we've locked in already for next year. We did lock in at $2.29 right before kind of the spike in oil. We locked in right before we issued the budget in December. So next year, for the full year, we'll have $2.29 for both heating oil and diesel.
And do you do that at the same time every year? Did we just luck out with the calendar, or
so
were you proactive with it?
We let it float for a while, and then we kind of have a dollar price in mind that we want. And if it hits that price, we'll lock in. If we don't, we'll kind of float for a little bit longer. So we did float this year for a little bit longer because inflation was a little bit higher. When it started to tip down, we kind of took advantage of that rate. We locked in for a year. The previous year, oil was rather low.
Sure.
So we actually chose to lock in for 2 years, which was the max we could lock in at instead of 1 year. So that's why we were actually able to get that $1.79 for the current school.
Well done.
You almost did.
And then just the reimbursement rate, just talk a little bit why it's so high. I remind everybody why it's so high
Sure.
this year relative to expectations.
Yep. So the pot for excess cost at the state hasn't changed. It's been a flat dollar amount for a number of years. The expectation was that a lot of schools were going to submit a lot of claims this year. That has not materialized, at least as the December 1st filing. Claims for the whole state were actually relatively low. If we take out the last year, which was kind of an anomaly, typically the reimbursement has been around 75%. We expected it to be less as districts were making up services, so that's why we budgeted the 67.5. That hasn't materialized yet, at least as of the December 1st filing. So we're waiting to see what the March 1st filing for all the districts is. Assuming that it remains low, it's going to be that elevated 80+%. If you see a surge in filings for the March 1st filing, it'll be lower, but because the March 1st filing only represents a portion of the year, even if there's a surge in filing, you're not going to get a whole year of expenses. So that's why we're pretty comfortable saying at the 80. It could go to the 82 that the state has recommended. And I mentioned earlier, that'll be another $69,000 in revenue. We haven't really seen the increase in cost with, a few exceptions in speech and transportation here or there, but it's really a matter of what the state's actually reimbursing.
Do you have any subjective color why we've not seen it on a statewide basis rise as we expected? I mean, everybody I think around the board table would have expected that, made the same assumptions, but I don't know if you have any color beyond our school district.
Not particularly beyond ours. I think just people have been able to service the kids in different capacities. Our students have been in for the most part the whole time. Others just have varied in terms of how they've dealt with that, and it just hasn't played out as well as may be expected in terms of recovery services or others throughout the state.
Okay, maybe grant covered some of it.
So I think some of it,
Oh, yes,
some of it's grant, and I
Yes,
also was
totally,
talking to
yes.
other business managers. Some of it is difficulty in finding special education staff, and so services tend to get delayed in some other districts. So it might be that we see this surge in claims in a future year.
Okay.
Part of it is the difficulty in acquiring staff.
And remind us what we set our budget at.
75.
Any other questions? Oh.
Any traction on the legislation or the conversation up there about increased funding, and will that get any traction up there, or?
So it is going to go to the education committee for excess costs. So there is some traction. It is the only agenda item, for instance, for CABE legislation. That's really their only agenda item. CAPS is also supporting it, so it's still in discussion. It's still alive, like that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can we just talk another second about that reimbursement? So are we going to be planning for, and I mean, I know we put it 75, which is a reasonable number, but do we feel we need to do anything differently in our planning given what happened this year?
So I think we're okay at the 75. It really kind of takes out those anomalies. Like I mentioned, probably really this year is probably an anomaly. We haven't really seen 80+% in almost 10 years, I would think. Typically it's in that 71, 72 to 74, 75 range.
Right.
I think at 74, 75, we're probably in a good spot.
Okay, thank you.
Do you want to go through the transfers, please?
So we do have two recommended transfers. The first, as I mentioned, it's really an accounting transfer, but it does cross broad categories. We are recommending taking $35,000 of salary savings from a SLP who's out on a long-term leave of absence and moving it to contracted speech, as we have a contractor filling that role. And then we are also recommending a transfer for $6,552 to RC12 for spring, summer part-time help, and the money coming from workers' compensation. And again, that's really to cover the cost of the part-time workers who are covering for the employees who are out on workers' compensation.
I would feel comfortable going to the board and recommending these transfers.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then I'm sorry, I skipped through the grant report. If you could just give us an update in the grants, and thanks. At the end of the packet, you have included a spreadsheet that's kind of summarized all the major grants through COVID related grants. So if you could just go through this grant report.
So no primary changes in the IDEA grant. Just a reminder, the IDEA ARP grant, which is on that spreadsheet, we are intending to use for next year. So we're not expected to use it for this year. That would support an SLP and a psychologist. The title grants have been pretty much the same and static. Title IV, we are expecting to carry over a little bit of money into next year. Not significant. The one change in the ARP ESSER fund, we did have a resignation of one of the one-year interventionist positions. So we are anticipating having a positive balance in that grant at the end of the year of about $40,000. And of that $40,000, 30,000 or so is that interventionist, which was unexpected. The one change in the food service fund, we do have a P&L of negative $27,115 through February. February tends to be a slow month. We have February break. We had a couple snow days. So we did have a small improvement. Average daily sales are at $13,940. For the month of March, which we're in now, we're actually over $14,000 for the month. And we expect March to be a very, very positive year. So far, sales are the strongest they've been. So because of that, we're actually increasing the positive balance forecast for the food service fund to almost $78,000. We expect to be cash flow positive for the March quarter.
Great. Any other questions? I think we'll go to public comment.
For participants in person, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge each participant to the mic. Any person? Ms. Ritchie?
Good morning. Happy St. Patrick's Day. My name is Deborah Ritchie. I live at 16 Stony Brook Road South. We got a little bit of the flavor of the potential increase to the pot, which we hope happens for excess cost reimbursement, but I have heard rumblings of a potential change to the threshold calculation. So if we have any information on that, perhaps we can update the community at the meeting on Tuesday evening. And just a quick thank you to the Darien and Norwalk High School students that participated in the town hall last evening on race relations. It was an incredible event and extremely important for all of us to hear the voices of our students and what it was impacting them. They did give their viewpoint on the open choice vote. So if you haven't watched, I encourage all board members to watch it. It was recorded. Thank you.
Anybody online?
No one online.
So can I get a motion to adjourn, please? All in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.